Cool. Welcome everyone to another Thursday open source gardening live stream from the open source team at Anchore. Some of us are here, some people are having slight delays getting here, some people are having trouble with air conditioning. Apparently it's hot over there in the States. Is that right? Yeah, it's been a bit warm here, and then I looked out the window and it was dark and pouring with rain. So, it changes from day to day. Usually we would have, 4 or 5 people. It might just be myself, Keith and Will today. We will see. What we're going to do is we've got some items to discuss. These are issues that we've selected that need further discussion. And we also have a whole bunch of issues that we can pick from semi-randomly with a fun script that I call Bug Roulette. Feel free to leave comments. I've got the chat open on the side here. I'll keep an eye on that. If you have any questions, anyone wants to ask anything at all, then feel free. The usual place to find all of our projects is here, github.com/Anchore, and all the projects are in there. The main two that we tend to focus a lot on is Syft and Grype, but there's a whole bunch of other projects under here as well, and you'll find them under there. Now, welcome, Alex. We've got, I think, quorum now. We've got enough people to kick this thing off. So, we had a bunch of issues. The first one, if the right people aren't here, then just tell me and we'll nudge on to the next one. But, this was the first one. This was a suggestion to merge configuration files if you've got multiple and have a hierarchy where Grype could read from one and get some settings from one and then have that overridden by another configuration file. Is that how I understand it right?
So I talked to this user specifically, and what they have is they have in their home directory a Grype configuration with a list of vulnerabilities they don't care about. And they want to have further project scoped suppressions. So what they really want is the ability to merge the I don't care about this type of vulnerability or I don't care about this particular vulnerability criteria between Grype configs. So I just wanted to, that's specifically what they're asking for, which is, I think, a slightly different problem than trying to merge the general config. I think there are some things like, well, I guess for things that there's only one of, like the log level, the most local config just wins.
But yeah, collections is like different.
Yeah. So I had considered a compromise feature because I think having, like, it's possible that people want to, like, actually clobber settings. Like if they have something like private Docker registry configurations that are scoped to particular projects in different config files, that accidentally sharing that is not something we necessarily want to do. But I think that the idea of having like references to an external file in the ignore list is another way to give this user what they want that I wanted to suggest. That's why I asked them if they're just trying to merge vulnerability, like suppressed sets, or if they're trying to merge the whole config file.
I think this is a fairly timely issue. It just seems though that Alex and I were talking about potentially supporting profiles in configurations and like if it's something that we could do in a general way. And this feels like in some ways that it's related to that, not this exact same thing. I guess one of the thoughts that I had for the profile thing was, what if we just supported multiple configuration files and then somebody could, have some very similar, in a very similar manner, have some overrides of things and they get merged together. But I think there are a couple of different scenarios too to consider. Like one is, let's say for argument's sake, you run one of the tools and it picks up a configuration file in the directory you're in, and then another configuration file, let's say in your home directory, because there are a bunch of places it looks. To me, that's different than if they say, let's say Grype, use configuration file 1 and 2. right? If they explicitly said to use configuration file 1 and 2, I feel like that's the case where like we would probably want to merge in order the thing that they're asking for. Whereas like looking up to find a configuration file is, I think, a different problem. I suspect if what you said is, is exactly what this user is looking for, Will, that they want to basically have two separate sets of ignores and get them merged together, that they would be okay with specifying both of those configurations if like that was one way to accomplish what they wanted. What do you guys think? Am I like kind of crazy here, or is this something that you think would suffice?
So it sounds like you're suggesting the ability to pass like -c --config multiple times on the same Grype invocation, and then those maps get merged where like the last one wins on things that there are only one of, but slices get appended. Is that the specific suggestion, or the first one wins or something?
The first one wins, but yeah, basically that. Yeah, in cases there are two different objects of configuration type objects. The values that are set in So and slices would get merged together in this world.
I think there's a big state space for like what we could write down, like output in Grype is a string slice, right? So if somebody has output table and output template, do they mean output both? And I think that's why I asked if we could get away with a specific syntax that means go also get the ignored vulnerability information from this other file. Because I think I can imagine that, so I guess we have sort of like scalars and lists and maps are, broadly speaking, the sorts of things that can be in a config file. And I think for scalars, you pick like the most specific config, like, okay, the log level is the one in the directory or the one passed on the command line or whatever, right? But then I think for some maps and some lists, whether we want to clubber or append or merge, like, isn't obvious. And so that's why I wanted to pick one map and say, okay, there is an append operation on the ignored vulnerabilities thing. That was where I was leaning, because otherwise, like, do we want registry credentials, which is a map of like host name to how to log into it, essentially? Do we want to merge those? Do we merge the maps as we're going? Do we want output formats to append? But I think it's not obvious which fields ought to be handled in which way. And I think that making it configurable which fields ought to be handled in which way makes a really big set of meta configuration that might be hard to reason about. Does that make sense, Keith? Did I understand that? All right, go ahead, Ella.
Go for it, Keith.
Oh, yeah, I think like what you said made sense to me for sure. But Alex, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, like, from like a prior art perspective, like this conversation of like how configuration, multiple levels of configuration, like kind of reminds me of like git config and like how does that work, and I don't like, there is the concept of merging, but it doesn't go past a singular value. So like it's not like you would take two values from two places and merge them into one ever. And I'm trying to think of other systems. I agree to, I guess, is in short, to what you guys are both saying, like merging collections automatically is too surprising, and I don't think we should allow that. But I'm not against the idea of multi-level configuration, but I don't think it's what he's primarily asking for. So like, if I were to go back to Will, your point, which is, well, let's see if we can get the feature in of what they're primarily wanting, which is like to reference, like they can reference like like sections of ignores in two different places. That would be a good first step, and then we can look at multi-level stuff as some future step. Is that a good parsing of this, or?
Yeah, I was imagining something like, do we have an example Grype config we can look at when we're talking so we get field names right and stuff like that?
We could start
The
typing
README
one in the. Yeah.
The README has one, or you can run Grype config on, hopefully the one in the README is right, or you can run Grype config at the command line, and you'll get one that.
I think it's close enough. It should be toward the bottom of the page here. I don't think this got the reworking yet. So I had one other thought here. What about
Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
what about something like what's a good way to put it? Like are there any YAML rules that say, hey, go load this other file magically? And so like somebody could just kind of sort of leverage YAML to like do this automatically for us?
So it depends. So there is within a YAML document, and the spec supports anchors, but when it comes to outside of the singular file, there's nothing in the spec that allows it. But there are third-party libs of YAML libraries that we're not using for this, but we could start using that does allow for importing from other YAML files. So I don't know if that was specific enough or too specific.
Yeah.
Nothing in the spec, but we could use a library to do it for us, yes.
Well, what I was thinking is because, like, in my mind, once you're off the spec, you're into like, well, PyYAML does this, and like whatever Ruby uses does that, and like whatever Node uses does that, and people coming from those ecosystems will be surprised by whatever the Go one does, which is truly a fourth thing. So I was thinking that in this ignore, or maybe as a sibling of it, we could have our own like thing that means like also here include all the ignores from this other file. And maybe it's literally just like include from, and it takes a path. And then at runtime, we try to read that path in YAML parse it, and we pretend it was dropped in the ignore.
So I think you're exact. I want to say the library. I'm thinking I have to go look it up, the specific reference, but I believe including YAML files from other spots, it literally is either import from or include from.
Sure. But I'm not sure that we want to. Maybe
Allow
it's
it
too
everywhere.
narrow to have the ignore list. So that's what I was wondering is if we'd be interested in having a like command in this file that says, hey, go also read this path and merge the ignores from that with the ignores here. Really just append, because it's a list. And ignoring something twice is fine. It's just extra ignored. So that was what I had in mind. If we had this person on the call, I would also ask them what they're ignoring so much and why, because I think the Grype is too noisy is a bit of a theme. Like, and that might be something that I want to that like. If we step way back from this, what they're really saying is there's noise that I want to take out of Grype on my whole workstation, and there's noise that I want to take out of Grype per project. And
yeah, that resonates. And like they don't have control entirely over both. Sorry to interrupt, but it's like I have the projects locally, and I might just happen to have a config file locally, and like it just kind of makes sense to be able to do this kind of like multi-level ignore. Well, okay, so here's a question. Do you think? Yeah, go for it.
Could they just use Vex? I think we already support multiple Vex documents. They could just use Vex to have multiple different Vex ignore rules.
That's true. But do we allow for Vex from? Well, we do allow for Vex from files. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that maybe they just have a like in their home directory, they have like I never care about it .vex, and then in each workspace they have we double checked it for this project .vex, or whatever extension Vex uses. Um, and yeah, that might be interesting, and that gives them something they can try, um, rather than us building the wrong thing based on a 5 sentence issue. That's a really good thing to point out. Thanks, Keith.
Yeah,
I didn't
I
think
agree.
of that because I've never dug into Vex deeply.
Well, on top of that, like we have a separate flag for it, and we can. I can't remember if it works. I think it works on a document level right now, but we could make it slurp up a directory of documents if we really wanted to, or multiple directories, or comma separated, like etc. So to support like even more of this kind of stuff, there'd be no reason why we couldn't.
I mean, my like understanding of this is that they're probably, he probably, like Will, I think said, probably has something in a home directory and has something in a repository, and they're probably very specific, two files in very specific locations that they want to include. But I mean, we could definitely improve it. I guess the just switching gears back a little bit to the configuration. I mean, I could definitely see other things falling into the I want to include this from other places, and so I definitely wouldn't really want to build something that's specifically for ignore rules, especially since the Vex stuff already exists. But like as an example, I think like authentication credentials like comes to mind pretty quickly. Like, hey, I want something provided by my web server that I don't have anywhere else, but I've got some shared ones that everybody uses for development or whatever. I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, but specifically, you're saying not merging those collections. It would be like the repo has no configuration for registries, but like the one on my home directory does. So therefore, when that merge occurs, I'm able to pull the registry credentials. But I'm like, so in other words, we're not merging collections across the same value, right?
Well, actually merging them, yeah. So I mean, because you might have like different registries that you're hitting with different. I don't know. I could see that being something that like one particular thing has like a particular sensitive value that is provided like during a CI run or something like that you would not have in your local machine. And so like if you run locally, you have one thing, maybe you have like 3 things, and then you just want one of them overridden. So like in that case, like the list would be take the thing from like it would be like local config in the CI followed by my shared config, and it would like take the local config value first and like append the shared config stuff afterwards. And so like it would be able to like override if there's like a particular but like registry host or whatever that like there's a different thing that you need when running in CI.
Yeah. Right. And I think, yeah.
Like, I don't know, the more I'm thinking about this, like we're basically talking about a Clio feature, and the more I'm thinking about it, I could argue almost all sides equally, depending on what day it is and whether or not I had coffee. So maybe we just make that a Clio configuration for which merge strategy was there, and we could debate about it at like by the time we are going to pull that Clio feature into Grype, or even allow the user to choose in a Grype config. Oh, that's a bit meta, but
I mean, or it could be a per field thing too. There could be some like struct tag that says like, oh, this particular field should get merged, this should get overridden,
right?
And so like it gives the developer some make some logical choices to do the right thing.
Should we make well, sorry, I said Clio. Fangs, Clio?
I think it would be Fangs. I think it would.
You think Fangs?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. So then maybe we should make a Fangs issue that like just talks about like this particular desire for multi-level merging, and tie it back to this issue. And I think we could probably, because I think if we can like get the right Lego blocks they explained and built there, we could pull that in here and solve the problem. Well, it's how we've talked about a few different ways to solve this, and I think we're we're probably at a good point with this.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll be happy to add that issue. I'll put a note to take care of that.
and then
Well, thanks.
Alan, in the suggestion we put, the particular suggestion is that you can pass vex, like literally -vex, more than once to Grype, and put multiple documents. And so I think that's what they want, is they have like, then they can have their like suppress everywhere document for their home directory and their project specific suppress document, and they can pass both to Grype.
Now, what I wanted to do is to read the Vex configuration from my local configuration, and then also the command line. No,
Yeah. That's what I was just thinking. It's like, can he put it like in the local config, like both Vex files or something, which he could.
Okay.
I think that, number of separate. These aren't configurations. They're just like correct me if I'm wrong, but a Vex document is a specific thing, which is like a specific format, and you can pass more than one Vex document, and Grype will respect will use all of them in evaluating vulnerabilities.
yes.
I just want to make sure we're telling them the right thing.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah,
Sweet.
thank you.
Cool. Right. Next is this one. Configuration of severity display. So related, similar, but slightly different. Have we had lengthy discussion about this?
Didn't we talk about this one last time? I think, perhaps.
Well, is this the Debian one or the? Yeah. I think one of the things we've run into is that I forget if it's Debian or Ubuntu, but they have a field we map to severity that really means how urgently they're working on it. And sometimes that results in surprising readings. Like if the security team at the distro has decided that they're not going to fix this until something changes, then it looks low severity. But I haven't read all of this, so maybe that's not what's going on here. Alex,
So yeah, it looks like we have already discussed this. So maybe, given we've spent some time and we've given a response, maybe we should move on to the next one.
Yeah, because what I think this one I think is in need of a proposal, and it's less about trying to understand what the direction is here. I mean, sorry, what's really needed is like setting the direction from like a software design point of view, which we won't do here. So yeah, agreed. To the next one.
Okay.
Unless Keith will shout out if you think otherwise.
I mean, I have unpopular opinions about that one, but yeah, let's talk about that one later.
Okay, this is the next one. 614.
Yes. So was it Will? You and I were talking about this one?
no, I've not seen this one.
Okay, I think it was me and Chris. Okay, so this came about. This is a specification. When this was first put in, there was a specification that was being drafted against cosign. You good? And the idea is that, like, when you do a vulnerability scan for a particular artifact or a container image at a particular digest, you can then, in cosign fashion, push that to the OCI registry. And it's not a referral, but it's like the same way that we do SBOM attestations. It's the same approach. You tag with a digest and .att at the end. And so you see more tags in an OCI registry. But instead of an SBOM being attached, it's a vulnerability scan for that particular OCI reference. Okay, so since the opening of this issue, there was lots of questions about that specific spec. And since then it's landed, it is a spec that is less than allowed. But there was a blocker, which was there where no, the predicate type was not specified. However, we verified that there is a predicate type specified. So this is like, we could, in theory, go and implement this tomorrow. And the question is, do we want to? From like a philosophical point of view, do we think that Grype should be doing this, could be doing this? Do we think it's a good idea? And aside from implementation, like how we would do it.
If I could repeat this back to make sure I kind of grokked it. The ask is, in a similar fashion to Syft attestations, we run a scan and upload an attested vulnerability report in a particular location, and that's kind of more or less the gist of it.
Yep.
I mean, my 2 cents are that, I mean, this is like kind of what Cosign does, and doesn't it? And like building it into the tools has kind of proved to be problematic. So I kind of feel like somebody could fairly easily do this with, you know, a workflow that you also uses Cosign.
I'll talk both sides to that one, because I'm currently philosophically torn on this one. But you double clicked on like exactly the point that I'm kind of like a little torn on. It's like, okay, this is what Cosign does. Like, there's no reason for us to go off and do what Cosign does. So that's the one camp, and that's the one side of my brain. The other side of my brain is saying, well, that Cosign command is like very long, and there's a lot of things that you can get wrong in creating that attestation, and so we would be saving someone the effort of having to get that command right. So that is like, if we're working with an OCI asset, we just automatically, you know, get that uploaded and to that registry if they have write access. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in between. So like for me, like the biggest friction that we've had with the Syft attest was like pulling in the Cosign library itself as a dependency. Like, that was a big lesson learned. It's like, we're not going to do that in the future unless there's a big change as to how that library is developed. It was too much of a dependency. It was too many transitive dependencies. And so if we were to do this in a Grype, we definitely would not be able to pull in that library. It would have to be a shell out game, just like what we do with Syft. But I think that was the biggest pain with Syft attest was doing it as a lib first, then pulling that out and then shelling out. So we basically had to do the feature twice.
Is that how it ships at the moment?
Camps,
it's a library.
Say again?
Is that how it ships at the moment? It's integrated into Syft.
No, well, it works by shelling out to the Cosign binary, and so the Cosign binary must exist on the path.
Right.
Exactly. It's the only exception we've made so far to that. We've had a pretty strong rule of thumb in Syft and Grype to like not shell out to things, and so we had for about a whole year Cosign library being used in Syft, so we did not shell out, but it was way too expensive for my build and like just asset size point of view. So we eventually, after about a year, took it out. So
Yeah.
I have a go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, I wonder if this makes sense in the actions instead of in the tools. Like if scan action made it attached to signed vulnerability attestation, like we don't bloat the binary, we just shell out again from the node process running the action. There's just a switch in the YAML to do it or not, and it reads the secret from the environment or whatever. Like, is that a better place for it? That was observation 1. And then observation 2 was that we've had talk a couple different times of having like a useful recipes spot for where people have like written 30 lines of Python that does something neat with Syft and Grype, but that isn't going to reach the level of like us building it as a subcommand. And I wonder if the attestation would belong there, because I think that like the objection that the users don't want to have to like learn another CLI is valid. but the fact that it makes our binaries huge and our build time slow if we link to it is also valid, and that our other choices, finding it on path, isn't awesome. And it's also sort of brittle, right? Because if cosine changes their CLI, we break, and we can't make that not happen. And somebody might have an old cosine on path, and so, like, if we can't link against it, and we can't, and we don't, and shelling out to it is brittle and gross for a couple other reasons. Maybe it makes sense to provide a recipe, either in one of the GitHub actions or like a scripts bucket somewhere.
I like the idea a lot of having useful recipes for some stuff like that. So I will strongly +1 that, especially if there's some case where it's really hard to get the command right. It's like, hey, we made a little script. It's got all the variables set. You just fill them in, and then it kind of does what you want. I like that quite a bit, instead of writing code that is kind of doing the same thing and might break when the CLI changes, to some tool. I did have one other question that I wondered about a little bit. There was some talk when we were implementing this in Syft that it was, I guess, more secure because it's like everything was done in process, and there's not really a chance of tampering with the file between the time it gets written. And is that a concern that people have generally, or is that just sort of a philosophical thing that it doesn't really matter too much?
I guess I'm going to make the argument that it's a philosophical thing that doesn't matter at all, and then you can tell me if the argument sounds crazy, and we could try to move the decision forward that way. So the idea is that there is one process, right? Like there's some environment, like some build step, CI step, local workflow script, whatever. Something happens where we do a vulnerability scan, and then we sign the result, and the signature includes like digests of what was scanned, and we push the signature somewhere. And that requires basically access to the thing that was scanned and access to a secret. And basically what we're proving is that the person who did the scan had access to the secret at the time that the thing was pushed. That's basically what it proves. And so I'd be a little bit like, if someone is willing to like monkey with the artifact after they run the scan, but before they publish, given that they have access to the secret, they could already forge an arbitrary document and publish it. So it doesn't seem like there's an actual cryptographic barrier. It seems like it just makes it less convenient for somebody who is willing to tamper with things in the wrong order. Does that make sense? I think that's my first impression hearing your argument. Maybe I'm totally off it.
We had to give up on this point anyway with the Syft when we said we're going to shell out to cosine because it's too costly. Yeah, like I think the original conversation for this was, if in process we're creating the SBOM and signing it and uploading it, so it's not even technically going to disk. So it like that was like the big, because we're using ephemeral credentials of that bit. And I agree, like if somebody can just generate more ephemeral credentials, it's like, well, what's the point? But yeah, we've already, I almost feel like it's not even worth like double clicking on, because we've already said for Syft, it's no longer worth it, that security benefit, if there was a benefit at all. And so for Grype, it'd be kind of a point, because we're not going to pull it as a static lib anyway. So we would have to shell out or not. I don't know, like this. Yeah, like I feel like, so I guess to answer your original question, like, yeah, it just isn't a dimension anymore. If users feel strongly about it, they're going to have to create their own integration by, pulling in cosine as a lib, pulling in Grype as a lib, doing that work, etc. And like maybe that's just another integration that we create, but we don't have a strong need to do that. So.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't like, to be clear, I didn't actually feel strongly that that's a reason. It was just posing the question because I recalled some discussion about it before. But yeah, my opinion is that, I mean, if somebody can, can modify a file between like executions of a couple of commands, you've got bigger problems with your CI pipeline than that. But
yeah, I mean, done. Wait.
Do we
So
have any
then popping
more
off the stack.
words? Or are these words accurate, or are they misrepresenting anyone? Or
I wonder if the in the middle could be time code later. I don't know if the live link works yet.
yeah.
Anyway,
I can totally do
that's
that.
just
I can edit that.
okay. Yeah, that I figured you would. I just it's going to be a long video. I think it might say, like, we feel it's too costly to integrate Cosign into our project. I think we should mention that, like, building Cosign into the project makes the build times too long and the binary too big. Like, it's not like we think their library is hard to consume in some abstract way or something. Like, yeah. We've tried integrating Cosign in the past, and it makes the binaries really big. It is basically the objection.
Got it.
And the build times go on forever. Yeah. Yeah, so we're definitely just not going to take that approach this go around from lessons learned. But other, like, recipe approach, shell out approach, like, well, it looks like we're leaning towards recipe and not shell out, in which case, like, right. So, but it sounds like there is a path forward here. It might not be a Grype feature. And so it's one of the main questions of, like, the original question on the very top, which is, like, philosophically, do we believe in this as like as something that we would want to support? And the answer is yes, to limited support, like recipe being the limited side. Oh, Keith, sorry. Is the answer no to limited support, or?
I mean, I'm like inclined to say this, like, let's make a recipe for this and call it a day, and and not support it in the tool at this time.
Okay, so it's really no to recipe. So
I think that seems like, I mean, a better approach. I mean, for a couple, we could make, put a page on the wiki or somewhere in the, in the repo or something. But on the wiki, if the CLI changes for Cosign, we could just go update it, and like, like, it's much easier than any of the other things.
Did Cosign?
I think I was trying to enumerate, like, the spectrum, but yeah, the preferences to recipe. Sorry, I didn't really say that. Let's do the recipe is what I'm saying. Yes. Sorry, head nod.
I mean, they have other documentation. So, this could really be documentation that resides in Cosign's repository, in their documentation. And that way, if they do change the command line, then that's their project to update.
Presumably, the people asking for this know that Cosign has its own CLI. Is it worth, like, are we missing something about their request that we're...
I thought the request was
is it worth ending with a
Cosign.
question saying, like, why is it important that this be part of Grype? Like, this seems to us like a script that calls Grype and then calls Cosign. Why is it important that this be part of Grype? Is it sort of the question I have? Because I'm afraid I'm missing something.
Well, I think this comes from Cosign themselves.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably why then. Yeah. And they thought it would be nice, but
yeah, it would be nice. But there's an overhead there, right?
Yeah. Well, and they have a Cosign issue, which we probably should have started our discussion by reading.
I summarized that issue. It's a long issue.
Okay.
That's the spec.
Okay. Oh, it's the spec. Okay, sorry. I thought it was like somebody's like, I've got a vulnerability scanner that outputs JSON. How do I sign it?
So are we okay
No.
with that and discuss?
I think we wouldn't rather shell out to cosign. We're not going to put like calls to exec other binaries in Grype. So I would just, yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think.
Cool. Thank you. Shall I remove the needs discussion?
Oh yes. Yep.
How do you? Oh god, I can't do it because my Zoom window's in the way. Excuse me. You know, I may just move you guys out the way, Bob. There we go. Thanks. Next is nope, that one. This is I think a meaty one. So this was something to do with if there's a bunch of layers with lots of different components. I think they clarified a bit further down.
Yeah, I mean, being able to identify the base image from a
Yes.
built image,
I
and
think
that
the
being a
example they
component
give
in the SBOM.
was Composer. Like that example is probably not great, but if you're using something like Composer, which will pull in PHP and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? I think they gave that example a bit further down.
So this
Right.
currently has the blocked label on it. Is it still blocked?
Yeah, I can try to enumerate some context. I mean, so yeah, there to do the exact ask of this issue, we're technically blocked. So that is, I'm unaware of a generic mechanism per the OCI spec to be able to know what the, universally, the base image layer, or sorry, the base image from the first layer or anything else in the OCI image, so that we can put that in the SBOM. Like, I think that is a technical limitation of OCI. However, since then, there are other avenues to glean the base image information in certain contexts. So like some things that I think were talked about on this issue were like, well, maybe we can trust stuff that the user put as labels or annotations on the image, and that one feels a little like maybe not. Like, it'd be great to not make those kind of assumptions. But since then, so Docker Scout is using, I think, Syft under the hood to generate SBOMs. And when they were first doing this, they were creating attestations, and they were making them available, I thought, as content in the image. And this is where I need to go and do some research. But like the ellipsis, I'm gonna skip a bunch of things. The question is, okay, maybe is this possible to glean base image information for images built referenced from purely Docker Hub? Base images from Docker Hub. Because, I mean, that's not universal, but that would be a lot of images. So if that's true, is that worth it? And that might be an avenue here. It needs investigation more than discussion too, but I kind of want to add, it needs discussion because it's like, well, do we think that kind of like narrow scoped solution to this very broad, we think impossible ask is a good path forward for something like this, or do we not want that kind of mechanism? So I'll open it up.
Go ahead, Keith.
My 2 cents is that I think it would be narrow enough to not be very useful. If I correctly understand what you're talking about, which is looking at very specific files that may have been put in by the Docker team that sort of could identify something.
Actually, I from a technical point of view, I actually don't know the current state of where those files are. I actually thought they were in the asset when it's pulled down, that it could be referenceable. And so if you do like say a Docker image save, you could reference it there. But I wasn't seeing evidence of that immediately, and I just need to brush up on what that is. So I actually don't know if it's like special files as content somewhere, or if it's something from like a Docker API perspective that we could additionally leverage. So I don't know. That's the needs investigation part.
Yeah, that was my question. Like, like we've been talking a lot in Syft about ways that like an online cataloger, right? A cataloger that's allowed to make network calls can find some more information, right? This reminds me most of like identifying Maven artifacts by hashing the jar and asking Maven Central what it is. And I don't know if like Docker Hub has that API, if it's part of those yet, because I know like when you do like from PHP 7 or whatever, like Docker is going to go get a particular blob from that, and we're essentially reversing that lookup. So I wonder if there's like a way we could have a registry client so that at least public Docker based images we could try to do it. Although maybe they didn't, because that it might be one of those things where it's a map and it's really easy to look up one way and really hard to look up the other way.
I had the same question, I guess, which was, I mean, I think we should probably have like layer hashes for things, and those have to be downloaded from somewhere. And I guess like, and you, I'm sure will know better than me because I just don't know, but like, I guess there's no way to go from the layer hash to like all of the tags that might be pointing to it, or maybe they're not even the right thing because they would be pointing to some different artifact in the OCI registry than the like the layers themselves.
Yeah, I mean, by the time that you push your image, like the original image that the fromlines for is not available via the layers API, which is what when you do like Docker pull, you'll see all that CLI outputs, essentially direct interaction with the layers API. I'm not aware of that like tag level information or like cross repo information there. Like as far as I'm concerned, it's like stripped. It's just a blob. So I'm in the need to learn more based off the current state of the world, but I mean, but I kind of heard a spectrum of answers between the two of you. Like, it was interesting because like I heard this one side which is like, well, there's bespoke files that might have been written by Docker. Maybe let's not trust those. And I heard this other answer like, which reminds me of like the Maven lookup where like we get some identifying information, and we go to an authoritative source and we then reason about it. Both of those comments like resonate with me. Like not trusting bespoke local things that might have been written by somebody and going to an authoritative thing online when we can. So, I mean, that could be just enough to add to this issue, and it needs investigation. Like, but like kind of that's the vision of this. If we were comfortable with the big question was like, are we comfy with that path then?
So it sounds like the path is basically there's a base image cataloger that that tries to like dereference OCI image hashes into tags that may point at them. And Keith, by your phrasing, you implied an interesting thing, which is that like you can take the same base layer and tag it with more than one thing. In which case, I think it is totally ambiguous to Syft which thing that is, which is probably also a worthwhile fact to put on the issue, right? If somebody pushes the same image under two tags, then whatever data set we have is like, we'd have to guess which tag humans think of that image as being. But yeah, I think in general, the idea of trying to use an online authoritative source to sort of like dereference the layer digest is a cool approach that needs investigation more than it needs discussion. Like, I think if we had a good way to build that today, we would. Are people in agreement with that? I
think so. In fact, I even think we have a pretty easy way to build it. I mean, in a very similar way to what we've kind of talked about with like binary hash lookups and different things like that. That, I mean, we could pretty easily scan Docker and, you know, say, I found a bunch of layer hashes for a whole bunch of known things and make that reverse, you know, mapping of some sort ourselves that could get looked up, you know, in a worst case kind of scenario. Not that I say we should do this, but like, I don't think it would be all that hard, I guess.
Yeah, so the cheap way to build it, because I thought about doing something like this before, is to abuse the layered API. You basically, when you request an image, you go to get the first layer, and then you just don't request any bytes after that. You get the metadata, and then you just move on. And yeah, I don't know if we should build that ourselves and like and distribute that data set, and that's where it's like, oh man, does Docker have something for this now? And this is where my head goes back to like the, okay, Scout exists, like can we, like, is there something served up that it could be further leveraged? So like, so there's the layers API and like higher level APIs like that may or may not exist. So, but cool. I mean, I think we just all aligned like philosophically, which is like, don't trust bespoke things, go trust authoritative things. And there might be a path forward here. Did that summarize it?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a long discussion and I've summarized it in one sentence and I don't know if that's enough.
Teardrop.
I mean, it might, yeah. I think it's already probably been said on the issue, but I mean, yeah, I would visit that this information isn't present in what Syft scans, and we don't know
Right.
how to locate this information from the layers that we have.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything to really add, because we've already said that on this issue. So I don't think there's anything to add. I think the only other thing to add is that we don't want to do like the bespoke, like, because like the label and annotations in that same category. So like I don't think we're very interested in doing that.
Right. So
I think that's one of. Yeah, well,
I was just going to try to summarize in like really, really specific language and just say like, we've decided not to trust pieces of the image being scanned to identify themselves. For example, like, I don't know, I immediately fell down trying to put it succinctly. Alex said it better a second ago.
It's even harder for me to type it while you're freewheeling.
Yeah. And so I think maybe because I thought what we decided is where we're going to investigate. And so like, what we'd like to investigate is if there is a way of I guess what we're saying is the data this feature needs is a mechanism to go from a layer ID to the tag that points at it. We are not aware of such a mechanism, but we'll look for one.
Okay. Do you want to type that in the bottom? Like,
yeah, maybe. I
think you can use the right words. I'll skip this.
I don't know. I'm just trying to. I'm not trying to stuff in your size. I'm just trying to like say, like specifically what we. What is it? 190 or 1199?
1199. Yeah, 1199.
It auto completed. I must have been here before.
So we are coming up to the end, and we have one more. And I don't know that we have time for this.
Let's try.
Okay.
You want to try?
Go for it.
Or, I don't know, Keith, Will, did I just put words in your mouth?
No, I'd like to try. This is actually the one I wanted to talk about today. So I'm definitely wanted to try.
Uh, 30. 65?
3065, yeah.
I'll keep typing on the other one for a minute and let you all read
Okay.
this. I know what it's.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from this one is that we are trying to support Bitnami embedded SBOMs. We have the SBOM cataloger turned off by default for good reasons. We've gotten lots of feedback about that. But this would be a use case where it's like, well, we know that Bitnami has a manifest at this particular location. We want to be able to read it and know about all those packages. But we don't want to turn on the entire SBOM cataloger per se. But having just like say a Bitnami cataloger makes a ton of sense. And then yeah, I think he brought up the point like, well, okay, if the user has configured the SBOM cataloger to be on at the same time, now we have to deal with those duplicates or something there. On top of if we think this is the right approach, this is the right direction. So
I guess, yeah, maybe you can shed some more light on this one, Will, but like is it literally just like SBOMs in this location? Is there like anything else that they published that would make sense to scan?
So if you look at the Grype issue that's linked at the beginning, like Anchore, like Grype 1609, and then I think there's a link to the Bitnami stuff. That's the issue we were just at. Maybe it's in one of these PRs. Funnel 512 might be a good one, or the Grype DB one. But there's a link somewhere to the docs on what Bitnami is. There we go. Okay, so that's the Bitnami feed. I thought there was also a link to a spec on what they're doing. Maybe it's in one of the other PRs. I'm sorry, I should have chased it down and put it in the original issue. Yeah. There might be.
Oh, I found it. So in the Bitnami VulnDB repo, they have an example of, they in opt Bitnami, there are SPDX files. So there's like
Right.
.spdx PostgreSQL.spdx, and that has, it looks like either, I think it's a full SPDX document. So it's a collection of SBOMs in the directory.
Right, and so I think the request from there's a vulnerability feed, like Bitnami maintains their vulnerability feed, and then they also bake these SBOMs into their documents and like into their images, and that's nice because the same people who publish the vulnerability feed labeled the package, which should make it have like a reasonably high data quality. We don't have the like, well, what do you call this package? Well, what do you call this package? We have with other catalogers. And so my thinking was specifically like detecting this setup where we have like opt Bitnami package name thing.spdx and capturing those, even if the SBOM cataloger is off, like having our own special Bitnami cataloger. So that when we merge the changes in Funnel and Grype DB to support Bitnami vulnerabilities, we end up with high quality packages to match them against. Because otherwise, I think that we might be matching these things with like the binary classifiers, and we might not have enough metadata to make a good match. So that's sort of the request here. I put needs discussion on it because like we had an SBOM cataloger, we turned it off, we could turn it back on, but only pointed at these paths. Like I wasn't sure. This is a like whether and how to proceed discussion.
I want to throw one more thing into the discussion, not to solve, but as maybe to help influence the direction some. We've had asked in the past for the same exact thing, but with GitLab. So GitLab has a manifest file that enumerates the packages that are installed. And I believe some of the packagings themselves get mangled or like they're gone, etc. So like this isn't the only, like I don't think Bitnami is like a exception here. I think there will, if we look hard enough, we'll find other platforms that kind of do the same thing, or something really similar, and they're not going to be exactly the same. So I feel like that plays into this. doesn't play into the SBOM cataloger side of things, but it plays into like the it's another file that has information about packages that's not a packaging manager.
So okay, so if I could like just make sure something just still isn't quite connecting. So if we scan an image that is provided by Bitnami, it will have those paths in it with SBOMs that describes all of the things in theory that are in that image. So
or I think the thing Bitnami put, right, like this is an image that exists to give you Postgres. So there's an SPDX that describes the Postgres that's in it. I don't know that there's an I don't think it's a complete SBOM of the image. Maybe I missed that, but I thought it was an SBOM of the application the image intends to ship. Sorry, go ahead, Keith. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. So we're not like looking like, okay. We're not like scanning a file system and we find like some blob that's a Bitnami image that we're ignoring, but we also have this other thing that says, hey, the Bitnami something or other got installed here, right? Like this is something that we're actually like directly scanning an image that was like built with Bitnami. And so, okay, I think I get it now.
I think it would like the base images will always start with like /Bitnami, unless somebody mirrors it, etc. But yeah, it's always like we're looking at an OCI image and it's going to be this directory would be there if it's from Bitnami.
It is there.
I wonder if a really simple solution would be to somehow add a configuration for the SBOM cataloger to match specific patterns. And so like if we're scanning Bitnami, we match only the Bitnami patterns or something. I don't know.
I feel like if we know we're scanning Bitnami is the hard part. Like, again, you could always use an image that's like they mirrored or is no longer the base image anymore.
Well, what if, are we scanning Bitnami because there's a file at opt Bitnami Postgres .postgres.sql.pdx or whatever?
Right. Sorry. If that's what you're saying, Keith, then thumbs up.
Yeah, maybe. I guess. Yeah, what if we just change the SBOM cataloger to be enabled by default, but have like some variable set of globs that it uses, which changes when you enable it or something. Like it's getting kind of like not exactly what the enabling and disabling kind of stuff does, but like you get what I'm saying. Like so, like we would like have the Bitnami stuff enabled just with a very specific glob that's looking for the Bitnami things,
right?
And then, like we add like some general blob, and then like when the SBOM cataloger runs, it just like finds all those files, so we don't have any duplication of stuff, and we don't have to like coordinate between two different catalogers, like removing packages or anything. We're just like only scanning, the big like everything for SBOMs, like in the with the configuration where it's like quote unquote enabled or something or other.
So right. So essentially, you're saying like make another cataloger, make like a Bitnami cataloger that is effectively the SBOM cataloger, but with a really, really narrow blob. Is that the suggestion? That was more about deduplication than I didn't understand.
Yeah, it's a little different than that.
Yeah, I think you're saying like the SBOM cataloger itself, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, would have dynamic configuration based off of like context of the source.
Or just like being enabled or disabled or something. But yes, exactly. They have like some conditional configuration that like by default would pick up the Bitnami stuff only and not everything.
The conditional configuration part is what scares me, because it seems so much simpler just to have like a cataloger that only does this, or even a cataloger that like imports the SBOM cataloger as its implementation, but just like it just narrowly says this is the only glob. I look for opt Bitnami start.spdx. Ignore everything else.
we could just add excludes. So like those SPDX things are, or those SBOMs are always excluded unless you enable the Bitnami cataloger. Like from the cataloger itself, like it somehow explicitly excludes things because we know that that's a very specific location to find things which are considered Bitnami things. And so you can find everything by having both of them enabled and find either, half of the.
Oh, Keith,
yeah.
Are you on this? I think I see where you're coming from, Keith. You're saying if you look at it from the SBOM cataloger point of view, you naturally do not have to think about deduplication anymore. Is that where you're coming from?
Yeah, because deduplication of this sounds like a big pain, and it would make it hard. If we could just prevent the duplication from happening in the first place, that would it could be a pretty simple solution then, I think.
Yeah. No, I thought there was already some deduplication going on. I would expect when I enable the SBOM cataloger to find these though.
Yeah, but it should. Does it not?
No, it does. I sounded like Keith was suggesting excluding these paths from excluding, trying to do something so that we don't find it twice if both the SBOM cataloger and Bitnami cataloger are on.
Yes, that was the suggestion, because otherwise I don't think today the packages would get deduplicated because they're found they would be found by different catalogers and they would have different IDs.
Look.
Did you say the Bitnami cataloger is off by default at the moment?
It doesn't exist.
There isn't
okay.
one. The SBOM cataloger is off by default. The SBOM cataloger would, if we turned the SBOM cataloger on and made no code change, it would just find these. I think part of the problem, though, is because it's off by default and Grype invokes Syft with defaults for the most part, that somebody running Grype against a Bitnami image, even if I merged all their work to add Bitnami provided vulnerability data into Grype's database, if these catalogers are off, we might miss all the packages on a Grype scan.
Sorry, I'm back at the thing that Keith said a minute ago. I couldn't move on from that one. Keith, you had said they won't be deduped because they're found by different catalogers. But we actually ignore the found by field on a package when adding to a collection and generating the ID. Thus, actually, I think they're going to be the exact same package / the exact same ID. So we might not have any duplicate packages for this.
If the metadata is the same.
Yeah. So if the Bitnami cataloger behaves differently than the SBOM cataloger, totally agree there. And yeah, for me, an implementation path would be the Bitnami cataloger imports the SBOM cataloger with different configuration, and then you have very low risk of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So popping up the stack. Sorry, Will, you had the next topic on the phone side that I missed part of. Sorry.
So the goal of the Syft change, maybe I should put it in here, but if someone runs Grype Bitnami Postgres and we have enabled the Bitnami vuln provider, the goal is to have, in my mind, is to have Grype invoke Syft with the Bitnami provider on when applicable by default. That's sort of the goal of this change, right? Because somebody could just configure the SBOM provider to be on, but if you just do Grype image, it's off, and I think that would be surprising. So what the outcome I'm trying to avoid is that the Bitnami folks and we do all this work to get Bitnami specific vulnerabilities into Grype's database, and then we surface the packages weird because we're ignoring their SPDX files that they also did a bunch of work to get into the image, and Grype doesn't find anything anyway. I think that would be a shame. So that this is I might have called this issue when you do Grype Bitnami whatever, Syft reports the packages declared in the Bitnami SBOMs. That's like my mental acceptance criteria, if that makes sense.
Yes, agreed. And
Okay.
somebody did not enable the catalogers in Grype, so it would have to be enabled by default.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we got
Okay.
a path. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, this sounds like the simplest path is make a new Bitnami cataloger, import the SBOM cataloger, configure it to only look at opt Bitnami glob.spdx. Have that on by default. It sounds like really straightforward to implement. It sounds like there's, we need to confirm, but there's no risk of dupes then. We could have it on by default.
Okay.
Am I missing
Cool.
something?
I don't think so.
I really thought there was going to be dupes from this, but like once we started talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, wait, there's no dupes. Okay, grain of salt, fingers crossed, knock on wood. But per glancing at lines of code, it looks like it would be okay.
Okay. I can.
You know what needs to be actually. You know what needs to be investigated is what the SBOM cataloger does. I believe it only pulls in packages and it ignores relationships. And it might be that Bitnami folks would be like, well, wait a second. We have, because I was seeing relationships in some of those other, in those SBOMs. Like, what are the components in those SBOMs that are there? Are they expecting to be promoted up? And that would be I think that would be significant. It wouldn't be significant from a vulnerability matching point of view, but it would be significant from hey, like, why isn't Syft raising up clear SBOM information that it is actually finding? So.
Okay, so it sounds like there are 2 points for investigation. So we add a Bitnami cataloger and turn both it and the SBOM cataloger on. Do we get duplicates? And then the other one.
Oh, you're saying to test it. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So 2 questions for investigation. And then the other question is sort of do we and should we surface relationship from the Bitnami SPDX and the Syft output as well. Those are our 2 open questions.
And I'll say other components in the SBOM. So like I was seeing other, like, so they had Postgres and then they had other stuff. And they had a relationship between those things. And it's like, well, should we raise up all nodes and all edges in those SBOMs, or because today the SBOM cataloger does not do it, I think. Would there be value there? And that might bring up other topics.
Yeah, I'm just going to change that to do we and should we surface all artifacts and relationships from the Bitnami SPDX in the Syft output SBOM, and then we have.
I mean, honestly, I think that's where I don't even think it's worth implementing until we know from like if that's what we want to do.
Okay.
I mean, I know this was like 11th hour. Like, wait, hold on, gotcha. But like, it'd be annoying to implement it all and then realize like, oh wait, there's value that we can't raise up. So.
Well, okay. I think we're pretty past time, but I'm not getting why we can't raise it up. Like, maybe we don't now, but like, should we? It sounds like we should just raise up everything that's in the SPDX that Bitnami put there when this cataloger is on. Is that what I'm?
There might
hearing?
be a technical blocker there, because
that's what I'm missing. Is like, how could there be a technical blocker?
Yeah, because the interface for a cataloger is too specific. It's not supposed to describe anything that you can find in an SBOM. It's supposed to be only packages and relationships between those packages. So if we wanted to raise up literally everything, the interface isn't good enough.
I see. What else is in there? I thought you were talking about all packages and relationships.
No, I'm just thinking about what SPX can express versus. So I'd have to look at it. Someone's gonna have to look at those SPX documents to see like what's in there. But like, I was seeing I thought I was seeing contains relationship and other relationships between packages and other stuff. I thought it was files, but I actually don't know. So
Okay. I added
But, like-
that question and added needs investigation. So I think that's unblocked. Somebody can go try to answer that question, and then
awesome.
we can decide what to do.
Yeah, because like the spectrum of solutions is like easy path, what we talked about, and then like there's some unknown harder path that we would get more information out. But like, so there's a path forward. If like we could even make this incremental, where we do the easy path, and then we like over time like bump up to like getting more information out of those. So
Cool.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is that I see value in doing the easy path and surfacing packages and being able to match vulnerabilities. Like if nothing else, like that still is a valuable thing to me.
yeah, agreed.
All done? Is someone going to type some words in there?
I am typing them now.
Sweet.
Thanks, Will.
That is the last one I think we had. Oh no, I think that was the last one, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, I opened that. I think there was 4 or 5. So, yeah, that's that one. Sweet.
Cool.
Nice work, everyone. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Thanks
is
so
good.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's
This
do
was
it
good.
again next week, shall we?
Same time, same trials. Cool.
Yeah, same issues, same conversations. Sweet. Thanks, everyone. Check us out on GitHub, and there's links to everything in the description below, and also on Discourse, which is also linked below. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day, and have a good Friday, and good weekend if I don't see you before. All right, chaps. See you next time.
Cheers.